So today guys, I'm replacing this with this. That's right, the stock FCR39 carb out of my Suzuki DRZ400E is gone, it's coming out, and I'm replacing it with this beautiful thing right here from Lectron Billetron Pro Carb. I'm gonna chuck this thing in here today, see how it changes the overall feel of the bike, and see if we can get some more power out of this thing. So no mucking around here today guys, let's get straight on into the video. G'day to all adventurers, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well as usual. Now I made mention that I had a big mod coming for this bike a few weeks ago, so you might have heard me say that. But this is it, it's finally here guys. A beautiful new carb from the legends at Lectron, their Billetron Pro Carb for the DRZ. Now a few of you might be wondering why I'm actually replacing the carb. It's not something I thought of ever doing really. I've never had any issues with my FCR39, the stock carb on there. It's done fine for me, it has enough power for what I need, but the legends at Lectron reached out to me a while ago and they wanted to send me one of these out so I could chuck it on my bike, try it out, see how it goes. But I couldn't say no to that sort of opportunity, so I said yes, absolutely, send it out, let's get this thing on and see how it goes on the bike. So a few of the benefits of running a carb like this over your stock carb guys. The first main one is it eliminates the need to adjust your jetting in the carb. It's got all these adjustments on the outside and it also does stuff on the fly itself for you. So it's probably not a massive issue here in Australia. Australia is pretty flat across the board unless you're down in the high country in the dividing range. There is some mountains, but they're not super high compared to other countries. So this thing is really popular in the States. Over in America, they obviously have a lot more taller mountains than we do. So this thing comes into play there. So if the jetting on your carb is set up to work really well down at sea level, and then you head up into the mountains, up into the really high stuff, it's gonna mess around with the way your bike performs. So some people like to change the jetting before they go and do a trip like that. This thing just eliminates the need to do any of that. This thing just adjusts on the fly and adjusts with the elevation changes so your bike can perform well in all different elevations. And the next big added benefit guys is power and performance. Now this thing should add around 10% more power for my bike. That's what they claim anyway, so we'll find out shortly when we get it on the bike. But I'm really keen to see how it goes with throttle performance. I think this thing will really smooth out the throttle performance, especially down low on this thing in first, second gear. With that stock carb in there, if I'm just cruising along in first and second, just lugging the bike along, it is a bit jumpy with the throttle, so I'm really expecting this thing to change that and smoothen it out a lot. So that's just a couple of the added benefits you get from a carb like this guys, from this Billetron Pro from Lectron. But before we get into the install, a couple of things here I want to show you if you're looking to install one of these into your bike like I am. So guys, being that my bike is the E model, which is the most common one we get here in Australia, we do have a few S and SM models floating around, but they're much less common. And then being that the carb is from the States, which is set up for the S and SM model, there's a few other things that I had to get before I could jump in and install this thing. Now I didn't think these parts would be very hard to find, but I was very wrong. It took me a little while to get a hold of these ones. These are some used parts off a wrecked bike. So I want to throw out a massive shout out to Luke from the sunny coast. I put a post up on Facebook asking for some parts off a S or SM model, and he reached out to me. He had a bike that was wrecked and he was parting it out. So thanks legend, thanks for sending these so quickly, so now I can finally get this install done. So these are the two parts that I had to get guys. This is the air boot, so the carb connects here and then this runs to the airbox. Slightly different sizing to the stock one that's on there. I think this is slightly larger to suit the different carb that I got. And then this is the manifold insulator boot, different sizing once again. I think this one here is a little bit smaller than what's on the stock FCR39 carb. So those are the two things that I had to grab to make this work with the new carb. And then for myself, I also had to order one heated grip for the throttle side. Got to change the throttle housing and cable as well to suit this carb. It comes with the kit, but it changes the throttle from a 2-cable system to a single cable system. So that'll be a little bit different. Should give me a better feel in the throttle, I think, but I guess we'll soon find all of that out. But enough of the chit chat guys. That's all you're gonna need if you wanna make this work on your own E model. I've already done the crappy stuff of removing the old carb and pulling the other throttle off. It's all ready to go to install the new stuff, so I didn't have to bore you with removing the old one. Let's get straight on into it. Hopefully this thing goes in nice and quick and I can get it on the road and give it a test today and let you guys know what I think. So guys, I'm about to jump in and start the install, but before I do, quick mention of a couple of things. Obviously when you pull all the carb out, it's pretty self-explanatory. Undo the hoses that connect it, it'll come out eventually. But this connector here, I've already taped it up, but that was from the old carb. I don't require it to connect to the new one anymore, so I've just taped it up there with some electrical tape to protect it. Should I ever go back to the old setup for whatever reason, that'll still be there to use. The next thing is this air boot, as you would have seen before, looks a little bit different to the stock one that I've got. It had a couple of extra hoses coming out of it, or where you could go into it. So I've just siliconed up both of those holes because I don't need them on this setup. The way the E model here has this overflow hose here for the oil overflow, that just runs down the side of the airbox and literally just drips down to where the chain is. So I'm going to leave it as is, whereas I think this attachment on the top on the S&SM model, it must be for that hose to connect to this, and it feeds into there and drips out the bottom instead, but I don't really require that. I don't want to cut that hose, so if I do go back to the old setup, it's still there ready to go, exact same as it was before. So a little bit of silicone in those hoses, pulled the pipes out that were there, and we're ready to go. Time to jump in. This should go in pretty easily. Once that's in there, I'll get the carb in there as well. I'll probably put the manifold insulated boot on the carb before I slide it all in there. Should have enough room. One other little tip too, if you are taking your carb out, guys, this right here is where the subframe mounts to the actual frame here. Undo that bolt there, subframe will pop back, gives you a lot more room here to play around with the carb to get it in and out. So one little easy tip that'll help you out, guys, but enough of that. I'm gonna get into it, get this install done. Let's check it out. You know those jobs that should be a 5-minute job and then it turns into a 5-hour job? Well, that's what I've had going on this morning here. It's taken me a lot longer than I thought it would, but we're getting there. But it's all in there. All the boots are all connected, the manifold inlet boot there as well. So it's all in there, ready to go. A few more things to do, obviously, before we can fire this bike up. But as you can see here, guys, there's breather hoses on this carb, just like the other one. I've got a video on my channel about rerouting the breather hoses on that. So when you go through water crossings, your bike doesn't die. Gonna do the exact same thing here. I've got 2 of the 4 hoses. I'll run them up above the airbox there somewhere a bit later on, and the other 2 will just go down as normal. This right here is the fuel line, so I'll have to cut that at some stage and connect it to the big safari tank. And also, I've got this right here. I didn't even know what it was. I had to send a message to Nick, the legend from Lectron. He's helping me out with anything that I'm not sure of on this install, so I sent him a quick text. I can't exactly remember what he said it's called, but it's to do with the air circuit on the old FCR 39 carb. It prevents the popping on D-cell, something like that. But I don't need it anymore. It's got nowhere to connect to on this carb. So I'm gonna see if I've got a bolt handy to undo that right there and cap that off. If not, I'll just cap the hose off for now and we'll go with that until I get a bolt. But either way, got to cap that off, so that's one other thing to do. But from there, let's just run this cable up to the throttle, get the throttle on, chuck everything back together. Everything down around the bottom here is all sorted, apart from a few loose wires and cabling that I've got to re-zip tie back up, but I'll get all that done at the very end before I chuck the fuel tank on. Now it's time to move up the top here to the throttle body and new throttle. So this is one of the heated grips that I ordered, one of the new ones. I've just trimmed it down a bit to match the original one, but the other one was super glued to the throttle body, so I couldn't save it. So I've just got myself another one. I'll slide this one on here, put some grease on it, ready to go. The throttle cable here is in the perfect spot on the top of the carb down there to run straight up the side of the frame, around the front, behind the headlight, and straight up here where it needs to be. So I'll connect all this up, get the grip on, get all that sorted, ready to go, and then I'll muck around with the free play of the throttle. So it's nice and tight there, ready to go, but not too tight. You don't want it too tight, so when you turn the handlebars, it'll turn your throttle on, which is a very bad thing to have. So I'll get all that sorted and nipped up, ready to go. And that should be it for the install, apart from the fuel line. So we're getting close to the end, a little bit of mucking around. And then I've got to put the bike back together with all the plastics, headlight shroud, bark busters, all the little bits and pieces that you guys don't need to see. So I'll crack on with this throttle, get all that sorted. So guys, the tank's just sitting there, I haven't done it up. I'm gonna try and fire the bike up before I fully go and put everything on, just in case something's wrong. So let's go. First crank. I haven't turned this on yet, so live action right now. Let's see if this thing fires up. I've already turned the fuel on. I wanted to get a shot of the fuel running into the float bowl, but forgot to turn the camera on. But anyway, here we go. Ooh. She runs. Wow. I think I might need to turn that idle up a little bit. It sounds a little slow, but let it warm up first to be sure. Well, I actually didn't turn the choke on either, so wow. I can already tell that that throttle is way more responsive. You can hear that idle just sounds a little slow. I can tell it's slow. But I'll give it a couple of minutes and let it warm up, and then we'll see how it sounds. I think you're supposed to adjust the idle when it's warm anyway, so. Wow guys, I know you can't get a feel for that probably through the camera, but I can tell already just by the sound of that. Feel this throttle and how quick it is. This thing is gonna have more power. That throttle is way more snappy, instant power. I can't wait to go out and ride this thing. I think it might take a little bit of getting used to by the feel of that. This thing seems to be working sweet. I didn't touch anything. I thought I was gonna have to adjust the idle, but after a couple of minutes and the bike's warm, it runs fine. So I don't think I'm gonna have to do anything. I'll leave it as it is. Get it back together, take it for a spin, and if it runs fine, I won't touch anything because it idles perfectly by the sounds of it. So happy days. Get the rest of these plastics back on and ride time. Well, here we are guys, out here on the road. Obviously I've ridden to this point, but I didn't video anything. Just had a quick 5-10 minute ride to see how it went. So far so good, but I'll jump back on and give you guys my thoughts. Obviously this is just on road, not going too far from home, so no off-road unfortunately, but we'll jump on in, give it a test run of the new Lectron Billetron Pro Carb. See how she changes the bike. See if we've got unlimited power. One thing I have noticed straight away is I need to adjust my throttle. It's a bit sticky at first to get going, so I'll have to play around with that, get that sorted, but the actual ride experience, pretty good. If you can hear that, I'm just under decel at the moment and the exhaust is popping like crazy. You would have heard me mention in the video earlier that little hose that was hanging out from the original carb, and I just had to put a bolt there and cap that point off. It has something to do with reducing the amount that the exhaust pops like that on decel. I'm not exactly sure how it exactly works, but now that it's blanked off, it pops a lot more, which I guess sounds cool, but I don't really need it. Doesn't really offer me anything, but that's one thing I've noticed. But the main thing I guess everyone wants to know is, what's the power like? Well, I would say overall, once I get the revs up, the power probably doesn't feel too different, maybe a slight increase, but I'll definitely say off the bottom to get going, it gets up and goes quicker than the FCR did. So initial impressions, I feel like I've got a bit of a gain there, definitely down low, and it feels smoother as well off the start. If I can get past that bit of sticky throttle I've got to fix up, definitely feels smoother. If I can get here and give it a decent go, but it's on some streets, so there's not too much I can do. But we will get out for a ride very shortly and give this thing a proper off-road adventure test. So this is just from third gear cruising. A bit up and go, a little bit more than before I would feel. Maybe I take back what I said, even in the high revs just then, that felt like it just had more pick-me-up, like it wanted to just keep on going. So maybe I really need to get out into some open stuff where I can just put the hammer down and get me a real feel. But so far, so good. I am very happy with this thing on there so far. Well, that's enough from me out here, guys, for my first impressions of this new Billetron Pro Carb. Back to the shed and I'll give you guys my thoughts and a few other ideas of things that I wouldn't mind doing to this bike now that I've got this carb on it. Fight this traffic and I'll see you shortly. So there you have it, guys. There's the first ride done and dusted with the new Lectron Billetron Pro Carb on board. First impressions are really good. The power delivery was super smooth out there on the road. Very happy with that. As I did mention out there, the throttle did feel a bit sticky to start with. I'll have to check into it whether I've done something wrong with the throttle tension, so I'll check all that, or maybe it's just the way this throttle feels now with the single cable throttle versus the dual cable that was on it before. Maybe it's just something I've got to get used to, but I'll check all the tension is correct and then we'll go from there. But overall, I'm really happy with how it performed out there on the streets. The next big test will be to get it out on a proper adventure ride for a day or a couple of days, get into some off-road, into the bush, and really test out how this thing delivers the power out there on the dirt. And the other thing I'm really curious to see is how it goes in the way of fuel consumption. Obviously this thing delivers the fuel in a more optimized way than the other carb, so I'm hoping I might get a little bit better fuel consumption and maybe travel a little bit further on this tank of fuel, but that's something I'll find out in the future. If you guys are interested in hearing my thoughts in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because once I've got a few adventure rides under the belt with this thing, I will revisit this again and give you guys a full review of what I think of it. Would I do it again? All the nitty gritty, all that kind of stuff. So be sure to subscribe before you go, guys. So before we wrap this one up today, guys, a massive shout out to the guys at Lectron over in America for sending me this Billetron Pro Carb. I really appreciate it. If any of you guys watching are interested in getting one of these for yourself, or you just want to get some more info, I will have a link to Lectron's website down in the description below. If you want to jump over, check them out, feel free, go for it. But that's all from me here today, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. As I did say earlier, if you want to know my thoughts on this carb in the future, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that review that I'll have coming in the next coming months. Be sure to like the video before you go if you did get something out of this one, guys. It really helps the channel. And if any of you want to support the channel in a more direct way, guys, hit the website link down below in the description. Jump over there, you can get some merch, you can get a GPX file to go on your own adventure, or you can even make donations to the channel if you wish to. I appreciate any and all of your support, guys. It means the world to me. Make sure you ride safe out there on your own two-wheel adventures. See you in the next one.